And I'd like to welcome you to Centre Ground, and thank you very much for agreeing to join us here tonight. So, and many people will already know you from your activism over many decades. You are a member from Cranach Together, and you successfully took the Irish government to as far as the EU Commission, and as a result of that, they had to bring in new legislation. You were also before in the water charges movement and the movement to protect our water from being private. Tonight, you're coming to us in a private capacity. You're going to chat to us about what happened to you when you found yourself in an A&E. Now, we won't name the hospital and we won't name any of the personnel involved. So maybe you might just describe what happened to you when you found yourself in A&E.
Okay, thanks very much for having me, Anna. I appreciate it. Looking forward to doing this. Not that used to it, but nevertheless, I appreciate that time is short, so I'll try and get through it as quickly as I can. I could talk about it for a week, but I'll pick out the salient points as I see them and begin and tell you that I'm of an age now where I'll be taking the odd run to hospital. I've already had a few, probably more coming up. And, you know, I've always had good experiences, mostly anyway. And on this particular occasion that I'm going to speak about, I had a dreadful experience. And about 15 months ago, I was in the ED in a particular public HSE hospital. And a senior member of the emergency department staff behaved in a very unprofessional way, and actually I considered she abused me as the night wore on, and I felt that I was justified in taking it up and making a complaint, which I did. I assumed it would be very easily dealt with, but I felt that she should be called to account for what she did. Anyway, made contact with the complaints section in the hospital, and they contacted the consultant in charge of that particular department, of the emergency department. As it turned out, he wouldn't speak to us. He wouldn't speak to my wife. He wouldn't speak to me. So I was left with no alternative other than to go through the process. And the first part of the process is you have to make a written complaint, and they respond to it. I sent in a complaint anyway. Got a lot of help from the complaints officer in the particular hospital. She was very good, absolutely brilliant. But, you know, the nightmare started the minute I sent it in, because I sent in a 2-page complaint and I got a 25-page complaint back from this particular consultant. The thing about it, Anna, was that when I read it, I couldn't actually believe what I was reading, because I found out that this particular consultant, he blackened me from morning to night, from top to bottom, and I was looking at something and it was mostly to do with CCTV coverage of the ED department that night, which I didn't even know they had ED in it. Anyway, I made inquiries, and I was very lucky to get a copy of the CCTV that night that he was using. I found out afterwards that the management was very annoyed that I was given a copy of the CCTV, and that actually explains a little bit why this particular consultant felt that he could demonize me and blacken me in all directions, because he was totally convinced that I would never see the CCTV.
So if I can just hold you there, just to recap on what happened. You're in the hospital and you were extremely badly treated, and then you sent in a written complaint, 2-page written complaint, and you got back a 25-page report. And on screen now we can actually see the handwritten notes, the clinical notes that were made that night. And I think there will be a clip coming up now. Yes, you're now looking at an extract from the actual report that came back to you, that you got back, the 25-page report. And what we can see is that the report that came back to you quotes the clinical notes, but there's a mismatch. So can you tell us a little bit about that mismatch?
Yeah, actually, the word I used, and I took a legal opinion on it to make sure I could use it, and they covered me and said the clinical incident report which you have shown there, which is a very important, it's actually a legal document internal to the hospital, and this particular consultant felt that he could falsify the wording. In other words, actually, what happened was that the lady that gave me the doing that night, because I asked her for her name afterwards and a sheet of paper, she knew that I was going to make a complaint, or she felt that I was. So she, to cover her backside, she generated what they call a clinical incident report, and in it she made out that I was not a good boy. So anyway, the consultant got wind of that, and he used it in his response to me, but he felt that she didn't blacken me enough. So he said he would do a better job on it, and you can actually see that when he put his wording down, which was supposed to be the actual wording on the original report, but he completely changed it. Could change it to the extent that I was nothing. And he actually introduced a sentence that didn't appear in the original at all. So here you have somebody that you feel is going supposedly to be there to help solve the problem that arose, the complaint that you have. And one of the first things he does is he falsifies a very important internal document totally against me. So that's one thing that I caught him on. Again, I got a copy of the original, and I was told afterwards I should never have gotten. I was so lucky to get things that normally people don't get. If I didn't get them, I would be wasting my time. I wouldn't be speaking to you tonight, Anna, because I would be under a bus and dragging myself out. Anyway, when I got the copy of the CCTV, which he had used in his 25-page report. And I went through it in great detail. Not only did I go through it in great detail, but I had a number of very highly regarded people, politicians and academics, who sat down in my house and went through the CCTV and then checked the wording that he used. And all we could see was he deliberately misinterpreted the wording of what he saw on the CCTV, and always he interpreted to blacken me, to completely. He accused me of this, he accused me of that.
Okay,
I
so
actually, I actually
can I
didn't recognize myself.
can I interrupt you there? And so we're now at the stage where you have received this 25-page report from the consultant where he has falsified the evidence, as it were, not knowing that you had a copy of the clinical notes and you also had a copy of the CTV footage. So you then contacted the hospital, I take it, to alert them to this. What happened then?
So that guy deliberately fabricated an incident to blacken me, to save the reputation of the hospital and to save the reputation of a member of his team who had actually abused and treated me very badly. This is quite unbelievable. And had I not got access to these, it would have been lost.
Yes, it's
So
really
anyway, I, I,
it's
I,
really unbelievable,
I,
given that we're talking here about a senior consultant. So we just to move it on then, what happened next? You
okay.
then, what was the next step that happened with the hospital?
I was on a learning curve here, and I was all the time wondering, well, what's my next step and what's my next move? And the process is that if you're not happy with the response, which of course I wasn't, they tell you then that you have recourse to go to internal review, and they call it an independent. And I said, well, okay, and who's doing that? And I found out that it's a middleman. It's part of the group of hospitals. So again, it's in-house. You can look at it any way you like. It's an in-house, and why they call it independent is more than I knew. No, because it absolutely is not justified in referring to it as independent. It's in-house, and as it turned out, Anna, this gentleman is of a lesser grade than those whose work he was now looking at and beginning to assess. So I ask you in all fairness, what do you think of the chances of a middle management calling out or criticizing something that has been put together by very, very senior management? It's only a joke, really. So I wasn't surprised that when he gave his report, the appeal report in relation to his independent assessment of it, he actually added to the abuse another layer of abuse on top of it. He sided completely with the hospital, and he actually suggested that I should make an apology to the person who abused me. No, I think that's pretty good.
It's quite unbelievable. So now, just to move it forward, you then took your case to the Ombudsman.
I did, and I spoke to him this morning, and I had great hopes that actually he's the Ombudsman, but I was speaking to an investigator in the Ombudsman's office, and I have spoken to him on many occasions, and spoke to him this morning, and I was hopeful, Anna, because I knew that the gentleman whose photograph you put up there, Mr. Tyndall, who is the actual Ombudsman, when he came into the job some years ago, the first thing that he noticed was that there was a very, very small number of complaints in Ireland against public hospitals. By international standards, we were at the bottom of the tree. We hardly had anybody complaining. So he decided to do a national survey to try and find out how come. Is the HSE that fantastic that nobody feels like complaining? And he actually found out that the word came back, nobody could be bothered complaining because they were convinced they would get nowhere. It was a waste of time. And anyway, they also were afraid that even if they or anybody belonging to them had to go back into hospital, they were convinced that it would be taken out on them and that we would be punished for making a complaint in the first instance. So he set about and he said, he looked at the whole thing and he put together a booklet called Getting Things Better. He wants to install a whole new protocol that will make people's complaints more looked at, they will get a fairer hearing, and that you will feel that maybe you're getting somewhere and you're not going to be put under the bus. Because actually what happened to me, Anna, is that I had a senior consultant. He sent the 25 pages to the hospital manager and the director of nursing. They signed off on it, didn't find a thing wrong, and now they send it to the internal review manager. He found nothing wrong. In fact, he added to it. And so by the time I get to the Ombudsman, I'm just a squeaky little voice from the hills of Donegal, trying to tell him that all these people have conspired against me and that they, in fact, are the ones that are telling the lies. So you can imagine how tilted the dice is, how tilted the thing is, that you have huge amount of weight against you when you land with the Ombudsman. And he actually told me, he says, the biggest problem that I have, or that I notice, is that by the time people get to me, those few that do come my way, it's the fact that they feel terribly aggrieved that they're not believed when they made their initial complaint. Because as happened with me, the whole thing was turned head over heels, and me, the abused, had become the abuser in the eyes of the senior management in the hospital. And that now I'm coming to him with this huge amount of weight, and I'm expecting that he's going to listen to me and say to the rest of those heavyweights, sorry guys, you're all wrong. This little puny little guy, 5'8" from the hills of Donegal, is actually right. So I'm fighting against you. The system is so rotten in it. It is so absolutely, I cannot get the words to describe how bad I think it is.
Okay, well, to end on a positive note, Enda, your case is currently before the Ombudsman, and we won't comment on that because the Ombudsman has yet to make a judgment on it, or the Office of the Ombudsman has yet to make a judgment of that, and we're not going to preempt that. But I suppose the one thing that really shines out tonight is how you followed due process. And I suppose the important message that we want to send out to people tonight is that if they do fall foul of a state agency, they have to follow the complaints procedure for the body involved before you can then escalate it to the Ombudsman.
Yeah, you got to take your time. You got to have patience, and you're in a hurry to try to get resolution. Forget about that. Sit well back. This is a very slow process. The only thing I said to you, Anna, and I said it today to the Ombudsman investigator that I've spoken to, I said, there's an awful lot of people watching this. I said, because I'm quite different to anybody else that has come your way, and I'll tell you why. Most people that come your way do not have any proof. All they have is their word and their version of what happened to them. I actually have the CCTV that proves that I'm telling the truth. I actually have a copy of the clinical incident report that proves that this a very senior consultant falsified it. So I think that I've got a pretty good reason to be coming to you. And I think if you want to prove that you're more than just hot air and that you're just not aspirational to change things for the better, here is a perfect example. I'll be watching it, and I'm telling you, an awful lot of other people will be watching, and they will take great heart if you do what you're saying you're going to do.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It's hugely inspirational, and we'll all be watching now as to what will be the outcome of your case with the Ombudsman, and we will be coming back to you later on during our panel discussion.